Are you finding that text in games is just way too darn small? You're not the only one, and I'm going to explain a little bit as to the potential reason why. I'm Steve Saylor, I'm blind, and if you're wondering how I can be able to play video games if I'm blind, or what I can see when I'm playing video games if I'm blind, take a look at the video here, or click the link in the description down below. So this video, I wasn't intending to make, and this might be sort of an off-the-cuff sort of stream of consciousness type thing, but there was an article that was posted this morning that I wanted to talk about and discuss in further detail about the text size in video games. You may have noticed that there is a lot of games, including games that are coming out in 2026, that the text size is just way too small for you to be able to read at any distance, whether you're playing it on your desktop, like at home, or you're playing it in the living room with the TV roughly between 5 and 10 feet away. And I'm going to read that article to you. This is actually written by Rebecca Valentine over at Kotaku. The article literally is just called "The Text is Too Dang Small," and it's in regards to Beast of Reincarnation. She says, I'm 35 years old. I wear glasses all the time, but with them on my vision is 20/20. I play video games most typically in the living room with a large LG OLED TV, and I sit on my couch about 5 feet away to watch it. In this manner, I enjoy all sorts of film, TV shows, and video games, almost always with subtitles on, and in the latter case, with plenty of text that I have no trouble seeing. Until now, until Beast of Reincarnation, the text is too small. Here's a screenshot of this text size. Yeah, I would agree with that. Let's see what else she has to say. It is simply too small. Maybe you look at that and think that's no problem. I can read that. If that is the case, I invite you to blow it up to TV size and stand 5 feet away. If that is not ineligible to, if that is not illegible to you, what if we put it up against a white background? This is another thing. Can you be able to read this text? I cannot. That is a very good screenshot, actually, of showcasing this. So, hello, did no one say anything about this during testing? Maybe you somehow think that is an acceptable size for text to be. Okay, what if we went into the menus and made it even smaller, like this? How is anyone supposed to read this text of recovery tonic or whichever? I'm having to be able to, in order for me to be able to even read it, I actually have to use my Windows magnifier to zoom in to a much higher degree. Actually, what is the zoom right now? It is currently at 300% just so I can be able to even attempt to read this text. Yeah, that is definitely way too small. Let's see, or this, yeah, have trouble reading that too. Or even perhaps this. I don't know. Is this a game for ants? And I think that's what even she even says in this article. It's just really, really bad. To be clear, there is no way to make the text bigger. Absolutely no options to do so. Our own viewer, Kenneth Shepard, also pointed out a related problem. When you start the game, the voice acting is in Japanese by default with subtitles on. You can switch it to English, but only after you've started the game and only through the main menu, not the settings in game. You may run into the problem Kenneth did where you don't know where you can change the language to the menu for most of the game. There's nothing that suggests you can until you dig into the options of the game's main menu and find it, and thus are relying on the very tiny subtitles to know what's going on. Or maybe you just enjoyed the voice acting in Japanese and want to keep that on. Too bad, dialogue is constantly happening during battles and other action scenes, so if you can't immediately parse the text before it's gone, while also swinging your sword around, you'll potentially miss plot-relevant info. Okay. So, I'm going to read this last sentence that she's got here. Game Freak, you are a AAA studio that's been around for decades. Get it together. This text is way, way, way too small. So there is as someone from the accessibility side, I deal with text size all the time. For my own personal disability, yes, I do have some vision. I do consider myself blind, but I do have some vision but it makes everything is just extremely blurry. For me, text size is a huge deal. There's a reason why I can never play games like The Witcher 3 or at the time, like a lot of games that came out in the past decade or so. Actually, I would say even 2 decades, is because the text size is too small. And we've kind of that's kind of been something that I've been talking about it and a few other folks have been talking about, but it's really like when you have a game like this, where this is like the norm, this is where I think other folks outside of accessibility kind of start talking about it. And this is why we say accessibility is for everyone, because what helps me out as a person, like personally as a disabled player, can help everyone else out, like Rebecca, who has 20/20 vision, doesn't have a disability, and wants to be able to and can't read the text that's on screen. Now you may be wondering, okay, so what if the text size is too small? What is the proper size? Well, there's two ways to kind of go about it. There's something that's we'll talk about the more on the app side of things, and then we'll talk about the video game side. First, the app side. There is a rule within user experience or UI development that is called like at least when you're building out a TV app, that's called the 10-foot UI rule. Basically, think of this: if you're in your living room and you have your TV, stand about anywhere between 5 to 10 feet away from your TV. If you are having trouble trying to be able to read the text that sitting at 10 feet away or standing at 10 feet away, then that text is too small to be legible for using a TV app. And the same can be said for if you are on a couch that's sitting, at least in Rebecca's case, 5 feet away. If your text is illegible from between 5 to 10 feet away, then that text is completely inaccessible and not going to be readable for most people. The 10-foot UI rule was kind of adopted by Amazon. They kind of sort of named it years ago, but essentially whenever they build their Fire TV apps, essentially they try to be able to accommodate for that 10 feet rule. It's not the perfect sort of scenario because it kind of is up to interpretation based on someone's sort of like vision, but essentially that is the kind of the general rule that is placed within TV apps. Now let's talk about the video game side. So I actually do have an article up that is actually from the Xbox Accessibility Guidelines. These are actually free to any developer that's out there. If you want to know basically more about how to be able to build games for accessibility, and you're not sure how, and you're not sure what is the proper, guidelines, Xbox has this completely free. Obviously Xbox has had some issues in the past, and including my own thoughts about accessibility. However, this is a free resource for anybody to be able to take a look at and use for their games. It's freely available for anybody. So they do have this in regards to one part of their guidelines is implementation guides for text size. The following pixel measurements are based on body height, which is the sum of the number of pixels in the descender space, like the X height space and the ascender space. So they kind of go into more detail up here. Essentially, like what is the descending space, what is the X height space, like it's depending on letters, like in this case, like a lowercase g or an uppercase h. Like there's a lot of like there's the cap height, ascender height, so it's based on the certain the text font specifically. But in the text size case, it does say in the note here, the following size represent the minimum default size that text should be upon game launch for each experience. Developers are encouraged to consider individual player scenarios, for example, the typical distance from couch to television, and provide players the option to scale larger or smaller at the player's discretion accordingly. The following sections include more information on text scaling guidelines. All right, so they've got basically a few different scenarios. You've got for console, and you got for PC VR, and you also have for mobile Xbox game streaming. Now let's focus on the console side. So this is generally for those who are playing on a TV setup. So on a TV setup, font size should equal or exceed 28 pixels in size if you're playing on as a 1080p game, which generally is a lot of like not necessarily now with the Switch 2, but generally Switch games are kind of up, like older Switch games are upgraded on the Switch 2 to upscale to 1080p now. But they actually Switch 2 is now, if you have a Switch 2 native, it's up to 4K. But generally, if you're playing a game that's at 1080p, 26 pixels is the minimum font size. It should be at that resolution. And if it's at 4K, 52 pixels should be the minimum size of text for a 4K TV or 4K setup. And then if you're on PC VR, it does go a little bit smaller because generally TVs or like monitors a little bit closer to you. They're less within less than 3 feet away from you, and depending on obviously screen size. 18 pixels is the default, or the minimum font size for 1080p, and 36 pixels at 4K. Now, if you're talking mobile or Xbox game streaming, you have 18 pixels at 100 DPI, 36 pixels at 200 DPI, 72 pixels at 400 DPI, and scale linearly as DPI increases. Because mobile devices have much higher DPIs for most TVs or PC displays, comparably sized text requires a greater number of pixels. For context, a 5.5-inch screen with a 1080p resolution is roughly 400 DPI. So with a lot of modern phones that are out there today, I mean, I have a iPhone 17 Pro Max that essentially, I believe, is a 6.9-inch screen. So this would be roughly up to 400 DPI and above, which means that font size should be at 72 pixels minimum. Now, I talk about all that to basically say, like, this is the kind of the default font size that games should be at. And I don't want to say that standards in video games should be adopted universally, because I find that oftentimes when you have these universal guidelines, you kind of stop innovation in regards to accessibility. I find that is a fault with the digital side of accessibility. They have a kind of rules basically called WCAG, WCAG, which I believe is the World Council Accessibility Guidelines. I can't remember. I'm blanking on it right now. My coffee hasn't kicked in yet. Anyway, so the WCAG has certain rules and certain guidelines for websites and digital apps in order to be able to make it accessible. And oftentimes, that's generally gives you think that majority of apps would be accessible. Unfortunately, they're not, because oftentimes the WCAG is kind of covers the minimum sort of accessibility, and they don't recommend, or they don't encourage more than what could be needed. A lot of people a lot of developers can just sort of take a look at that and just use it as a checkbox, or in worst cases, use a website that essentially you insert one line of code into your website and it claims that it's going to make your website accessible. That is not the case. It's an overlay, does not work. Do not ever do it. But often, so I'm afraid that it would do this for video games, because of the fact that if we start putting standards and specific guidelines to video games, we start eliminating potential innovation. Developers could just use it as a checkbox. I've got my minimum text. I've got my my color filter or colorblind filters. That's it. I'm done. I've now made this accessible with that. And with games being, you have to sort of create a game that's different in order to be able to stand out. Every game tries to be unique. You can't really have standards in place. Case in point, the game Keeper, which I love, from Double Fine. If there was standards in place, if there was guidelines for video games, a lot of people would say that subtitles would be an option that has to be in every video game. Problem is Keeper doesn't have any dialogue, so it would make no sense for them to be able to put a subtitle option in the game, and it may potentially be declared as inaccessible by a lot of guidelines and a lot of different tags that are on storefronts, because it doesn't have subtitles. And in reality, it's actually more, and subtitles are designed for deaf and hard of hearing folks, but also for folks like Rebecca and myself that usually prefer to have subtitles, even though if we're not deaf and hard of hearing. Having that option there basically would help us out a lot. But if there's a game that has no dialogue and it doesn't have a subtitle tag, then a lot of deaf and hard of hearing folks who are looking for that tag may consider that Keeper to be inaccessible to them, because they're afraid that there would be dialogue that they couldn't be able to see and read because there's no subtitles. So that's what happens if standards sort of come into place. So in regards to text size, I think developers need to be able to be a lot more flexible when it comes to text size, because of a lot of folks that are playing on either handheld or on PC or on TV, and we need options to be able to include text size. Now, again, I don't want to be able to say that standards need to be in place for this, but I think in this is probably the one case where I feel like it would benefit everybody if there was a minimum font size for all games. because it often works out in betterment to players depending on what device they're playing on, whether it's on mobile, like mobile game, like on cell phones, or using handhelds like the Steam Deck, or in a TV setup in the living room, or even on PC. If you allow the players to be able to adjust their font size to whichever works best for them, it would work out a lot better for the user in the end run. Now, granted, developers, if you're watching this and you're like, it would mean having to be able to spend so much time in developing the UI in order to be able to make this work. I understand that. Here's where I would say, if you are able to build an UI that is flexible, or that does have a default minimum larger font size, it makes it much easier later on down the road to be able to change that and update it. Now, there is never a bad time to be able to add accessibility, including after launch. Outer Worlds, they had a small text size. A developer was able to implement that, a text size slider, and was able to put that in to convince their higher ups to be able to include that in a patch that launched about 3 months later. So it does actually help out, and it helped out someone like myself. So it can happen at any given point. But when you have the ability to be able to design the UI to accommodate a larger text size, or at least accommodate multiple different font sizes in the beginning when you're designing that UI, it just makes it much easier later on down the road. So anyway, all that to be said is I still can't believe, as Rebecca said, in 2026 we still have games that have small text size. I didn't even get to the aspect of the like opaque, like basically a background to it that she talks about in the video, where basically if there's a white background on white text, the text is completely illegible. That's why we need more options and subtitles, but that's a different other topic altogether. I'm just talking about text size in this one. What do you think? Are there games that you would love to be able to play but can't because of text size? Let me know in the comment section down below. That's it for me. Sort of, again, stream of consciousness kind of video, but I hope all this information does make sense. Take care. I'll see you in the next one. As always, I remain obedient to yours. Bye-bye.